French President Emmanuel Macron won a second term in office after defeating his far-right challenger Marine Le Pen. The incumbent president received more than 58% of the vote, and he is the first French president to win re-election in 2 decades. Despite her defeat, Le Pen made significant gains with French voters in the final weeks of the election. The 3-time presidential candidate received 41% of the vote, making it the closest a far-right candidate has been to claiming victory in any French election. For more on this, we're joined by Ambassador Philippe Étienne, the French ambassador to the United States. Mr. Ambassador, thanks for your time. What does Emmanuel Macron's victory mean for France, domestically and in the international world?
It means, first, thank you for your invitation. It means domestically the continuation, the deepening of the policies which have been followed in terms of reforms, social and economic reforms. The unemployment is much lower now than 5 years ago. The reform of the apprenticeship and vocational training has been a huge success. Such reforms will continue, but there will be a much bigger accent on the climate and energy transition. The ambition will be still bigger. And of course, our president has announced he will take into account what happened. He will take into account the message given by all the voters, those who voted for him, but also those who voted for his opponent and those who did not vote. And he has announced a new method, a new governance to associate more the citizens. Internationally, it means obviously the confirmation of the project proposed by President Macron, by Emmanuel Macron to the French people, which is based on the European sovereignty, the pooling of national sovereignty in the European Union, a stronger European Union, which will be also a more reliable partner for the United States. It will mean the continuation and the deepening of our support to the Ukrainian people facing the invasion by Russia. It will mean also, together with the US and with other partners everywhere in the world, facing the global challenges, the climate challenge, the global health challenge, the security challenges we face now and which are bigger and bigger.
Among the domestic issues you mentioned was the unemployment rate, which is something that's consistent in the United States as well, but hasn't been enough alone to raise approval ratings or popularity of a lot of world leaders. And we note that Macron won by a significant margin, but Marine Le Pen's message did seem to resonate with a good portion of the French population. They're feeling the impacts of the increased costs, the inflation that makes these jobs numbers a little bit less relevant. How is President Macron addressing that issue?
You're right, it was an issue at the core, at the center of the electoral campaign. The purchasing, as I said, the unemployment, especially unemployment for young people, is much lower than it was at the beginning of the first mandate of Emmanuel Macron. And the purchasing power over the 5 years has improved, but recently, and to a certain extent, it's not the only reason, but also because as a consequence of the war waged by Russia in Ukraine, invading Ukraine, we have, like in the US, like in other countries, like in most economies, a surge in inflation. So the debate was very much about the purchasing power. Our government has in the recent weeks and months introduced a cap to protect the people, but the president, or the re-elected president, has announced a series of measures to protect the purchasing power of the French people, especially the ones who have lesser revenues. It will also lead to a rise in the pensions for retired people and civil servants as well.
Ambassador Étienne, we know Russian President Vladimir Putin, who in hindsight very much lied to President Macron about Russia's intentions in Ukraine, actually congratulated him on re-election, sincerely wishing him success in his state activities as well as good health and well-being. So what can you tell us about President Macron's relationship with President Putin in the weeks and months since Russia invaded Ukraine?
As you know, our president has made, in close coordination with our allies and partners, like the United States, but most importantly, in close coordination with the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, very big efforts to convince the Russian president not to go to war, and he has been among those proposing solutions to rebuild the European security architecture. Once the Russian president has decided to invade Ukraine, we, France, in particular our president, we have stood very, very firmly, especially as we have had the chair, and we are still having the chair of the European Union. We have acted decisively against Russia. We have, in coordination with the US, we Europeans, we have decided unprecedented sanctions, and we have, first time in history, the EU spends money, 1.5 billion euros already, to buy weapons to deliver to Ukraine. Our president has made clear, still last week, quite recently, that we will not only continue but develop this policy of supporting, including militarily, the Ukrainians who fight bravely for their independence, for their territory, without being ourselves at war, of course. But we will also deepen our economic, our humanitarian support to Ukraine, and we will also continue to welcome the refugees from Ukraine. 5 million are on the territory of the European Union, including in France. Their children are in our schools. We have decided very, very quickly after the invasion to protect them, to give them access to schools, to social benefits, to jobs. So all of this is an incredible support, but which is more than deserved by the incredibly courageous fight of the Ukrainian people.
After a big week for the French government and the French people, and a busy week, Ambassador Philippe Étienne, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.